Welcome to another episode of Mysteries Unknown. In tonight's podcast, I've got Janet, who had one of these encounters. This is kind of what your typical encounter is. She was walking on this trail and she had a Bigfoot creature walk out in front of her. Then we're going to talk about something that happened with her and her dad as a young child. She told me that she believes that her dad hit a Dogman creature one night in the Kansas City area. So we're going to get into all that. But before I do, I just want to say thank you so much for being here, for being part of this podcast. Could not do it without you guys. You guys are amazing. If you've got a mystery or an encounter you would like to send me, you can send it to me by email at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. Janet, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm really excited to have you here. I know that you're a member of the channel, and I really appreciate all the support. And when you reached out and told me you had an encounter you wanted to talk about, I knew I had to have you on. So why don't you take us back to this encounter that happened, I believe, in 2015 in the Kansas City area. Kind of walk us through what happened and kind of walk us through that day.
I was walking down. It was hot, so I thought I'd go to the river and sit where there was a breeze. And there's a park down there. And I was just kind of walking around, not doing much, just enjoying the walking and sightseeing. And I was walking down this street towards the river, and this bipedal thing came out of the woods and took 3 strides across the road, pushed some bushes out of his way, and went in and didn't see him after that. It wasn't a very wooded area. There was just where he came out of was more weeds than trees. Probably about 7.5, maybe 8 foot tall. Reddish brown hair. You could tell that some leaves and twigs was in his hair because it was matted into his hair. Very long arms, long strides. I just happened to be, I was looking down at the ground and something just told me to look up. And when I did, I seen him jump and run towards the river. And it was crazy. It took me a long time to be able to sleep at night after that. I had a lot of bad dreams. I just couldn't figure out what in the world it was. And everybody's like, well, why didn't you take a picture? You don't think of those things. You don't. Not in 10 seconds or less.
Had you heard of Bigfoot at all prior to that incident or knew much about it before that?
I didn't know much about it. I hadn't really watched it a lot about it. I mean, I think we watched a couple of movies when I was growing up as a kid on TV, but as far as knowing that these things are real, no. I just thought it was all make-believe, like everybody else did, till they get their encounter. Then they're like, what?
I hear that a lot. A lot of times people, we live in a society where people have to see to believe, and I get that. But once you think, these things, and you realize these things are out there, it does change things for you. And one of the first questions I ask my guests is, how did that encounter change your life?
I paid attention to my surroundings a lot more. I was very alert. I was always listening. Anytime I was out there in the woods or out just walking my dog, and I'm always paying attention to my surroundings now. I don't miss nothing that something tried to sneak up on me or anything like that. So
definitely will put your head on a swivel, that's for sure. And it's changed my life in that way. And you really do pay a lot more attention, especially when you're out in the woods. But how far away from the city was you, or was this really close to Kansas City?
It was very close to Kansas City. It was down towards the city market area, just a place where they have places on weekends that come in, vendors selling their stuff, and it's like a weekend thing during the summer, spring, and fall. Not so much in the wintertime, but there is a lot of traffic that comes through there in the summer and spring. And that's what I couldn't get. It was so close. The only thing I could think of was it's follows by water, and it got out just to rest, maybe get something to eat, and then it went right back towards the river where it came from and kept on moving.
These kind of encounters make you scratch your head. I had a gentleman on the show, gosh, it's probably been 6 months ago or longer, but he was from Oklahoma City. And he was telling me that they're all around the city. He's had, encounters and stuff in that area. And so, these things are popping up everywhere, and it makes you wonder why. I personally think, maybe they're migrating through, they're just moving through, things like that. But so have you seen anything since then? Have you heard any other encounters in that area, or was that kind of a one-off thing?
No, no, that was just me and me alone. Nobody else ever seen it. And if they did, they didn't report it. So,
I really do appreciate you coming forward and talking about that. I know these things are not easy to talk about, especially with some of the ridicule that people get when they come forward. And hopefully, we're changing that with this platform a little bit. But um, did you happen to smell or sense anything before or after that, or was it just one of those encounters that happened so quick it took you a minute to realize what was going on?
it happened so quick. I didn't smell nothing. He was probably a good 120, 130 yards away from me. So he was a little ways down the road, but what I saw was long arms and that hair. That hair was just it was it was matted. I mean, it just you could tell that it was been in the woods and you know, and it didn't have, at first I thought it was just a homeless person running out of the woods, but I mean, we do have those here, but it wasn't nothing like that. I mean, it was a creature. I mean, the hair on its legs, the the stride that it took, no man could have ever. I mean, they could if they was trying to hop or jump, but it was it was something interesting. That was for sure. I mean, like I said, it was probably 3 or 4 days before I could get actually settled down to sleep at night, but yeah.
Well, they're life changing encounters, and we're seeing stuff that we're told our whole lives are not supposed to be there, and so sometimes it's hard to realize what to do with that. What are you supposed to do with that? My encounter when I was 14, I buried it for years, and I wouldn't talk about it, and eventually you forget about this stuff and you move on, and I could see how that would keep you up at night. And with that encounter and diving into this world and learning all the stuff, that you do, as typical when you see these creatures, you start researching and whatnot. But what do you think these things are, if you had to guess?
I think they are living, breathing things when they're here. I don't know if they travel through portals or they have a lot of connection to the waterways and the electric grid. It seems like, and there's an electric line that runs down there by the river. That so I really don't know. I mean, they look like living creatures to me. I mean, I didn't. It wasn't transparent. I didn't see through it. It was solid. So it has to be some kind of living, breathing thing. I don't know if they're fallen angels or not. I don't know if I really believe in fallen angels, but you just never know.
It's one of those things, Janet, that makes you sit back and scratch your head and just keeps you up at night, right? Like it does me. I sit and I think about this stuff, and there's no experts, and all we can do is take an educated guess. There are opinions out there, and that's really all we can do. So, yeah, I understand, and I think you summed it up best. Like I really don't know. How can you know? But if you had the opportunity to see this thing again, would you want to?
I'm real curious about it now. Um, I do plan on doing some investigations on my own on the outskirts of Kansas City. I got a few places in mind, and I'm going to go see what I can find out there. And
Janet, I know that you had told me on one of the last lives, you'd mentioned that your dad actually ran over what you thought could possibly be a Dogman creature when you were, younger, when you were just a kid. Why don't you walk us through that experience and maybe tell us a little bit about what happened?
that night, it was cold out. I'm thinking it was in the fall time, if I remember correctly. Um, my dad came down to pick us up from our cousins. They were watching us while my mom and dad worked. And my dad came down to pick us up to take us home. And we were driving on the dirt road going up to the house. And this four-legged creature come out, and my dad ran splat over it. And I didn't get a good look at it when he hit it, but I did get a good look at it when it was in the back of the truck. It was long. Um, I don't remember if it had paws or hands. I do know that it was a very dark colored creature, so it couldn't have been a coyote. I think my dad and my cousin was trying to play that off as one, so we wouldn't be asking a whole bunch of questions. But I do know that my cousin, like I told you, he um, he did a lot of trading at Native American trading post down in Oklahoma, and that's where he took that hide to. And they never talked about it ever again. It was just like they dad killed it, and it was no big deal, and everybody went their own way. And I know that it wasn't a wolf. I know that much. It was just dark colored, and it had a very narrow nose on it.
How long do you think this creature was? I know that you had told me, before we started recording that the bed of your dad's truck was about 8 foot long. Do you remember how long this thing was?
He took every bit of that from the truck of the bed to the back of the cab, all the way to the tailgate. And my dad had the tailgate up, so it was probably 7.5 foot long.
Yeah, it sounds like a really big creature. And you said that you got curious, and you were telling me, and if you don't want to talk about it, that's perfectly fine. But you said you gotten curious and sneaked a peek at this thing after.
I got curious.
Yeah, what?
Yeah, I got out of the truck and I went to look at it. I climbed up on the tailgate to look at it, and it growled at me, and then I screamed. And that was the end of for me. I was back in that truck.
Well, I certainly don't blame you for that. I'd have done the same exact thing. And you know, you can have the opinions you want to think about Bigfoot, and whether they're fallen angels or what they are, and but I think there's no question that Dogman is pure evil. That these things thrive off of fear, and they live off of that stuff. Whether you saw one or not, who knows? But that's a really scary encounter as a kid. But your dad never talked about that again, right? They never brought it up, never mentioned it again.
No, he couldn't wait to get down to my cousin's house and let him know that he had hit this thing. And it was still alive when I crawled back there with it growling like it did. They did come out, and I do believe my cousin brought his gun with him and shot it in the head to finally put it out of its misery. But as far as it trying to crawl or trying to get out of that back of that truck, it didn't. So evidently, when Dad hit it, he hit it pretty hard to either break its uh, spinal cord or his pelvic area. Because I know he hit it pretty hard.
Yeah, that had to be really traumatizing as a kid, and just one of those situations and things you don't really know what to do with. And I'm sure you spent a lot of nights maybe thinking about that, and with that, and then the Bigfoot stuff that you saw and happened to you. You've seen a lot of stuff. And what would you say to somebody that's listening to this podcast that maybe doesn't believe in cryptids or Bigfoot or Dogman? What would you say to them?
It's everybody's personal opinion if they believe or not. You can't make anybody believe you if they don't want to believe you. But until they see one, they're going to know that they are real, and they do move around out here in these wooded areas, and you just don't know what's going to go on out there in the woods anymore.
No, I think you summed it up. You really don't know what's going on in the woods. There's a lot of stuff out there that we just don't understand, and probably never will. But Janet, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for being a member and for coming on the show and sharing your encounter. I really do appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me. I enjoy it. Thank you.
In tonight's podcast, I've got Wade Running Crane with me, and Wade is a Native American who had a very scary Class A encounter with Bigfoot a few years back while he was fighting a fire. This encounter gets very, very scary. A lot of strange things happen, and I was unfortunately not able to finish the interview because of internet connection, and I lost Wade through part of the interview. But there's a lot of things that happen in this encounter that are really hard to explain, and I'm going to let Wade tell that story. But before I do, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all the support. Stay towards the end of the podcast. I'll give you my thoughts as always, and let's just jump right into Wade's story.
Okay, I was a MIF firefighter, and MIF firefighter is a Montana Indian firefighter, and I was out with Hayes and Lodgepole. I'm a Blackfeet firefighter, and a MIF firefighter is a well-trained firefighter that's qualified to go out on the fires. Well, anyway, I went out with Lodgepole and Hayes, and during our time out, we were put on spike. And we were on spike for like 5 days, and we were like hungry and tired of being out in the wilderness and wanted to eat something and get a good night's sleep. Well, anyway, we got to go back to camp after 5 days, and they gave us enough time to turn in and eat something before we went and took a shower and turned in. Well, on my way back from the showers, there was a tame deer, and I was an EMT and paramedic, and the one basically making sure all my crew made it back into camp. So I was the last one back from the showers, and I was walking back, and there's a place up here in Waterton Park, National Park in Banff, Canada. You can go and pet the deer and feed them. Well, anyway, I run into a deer like that, and I was on my way back from the showers, and it really kind of like amazed me and this impressed me because I seen life. All I had seen up to that point was death and burnt trees and the smell of smoke, and I was sick of it. And anyway, next thing I looked up and I seen this thing walking upright. And it was getting down on the ground like this, getting up and sniffing around and looking around, and get down on all fours and get back up. And it would, like how housing like for forestry housing, because they were our security in that camp, and I was surrounded by about 2,900 other firefighters that we eventually did wake up. But that come later on. Well, anyway, I watched this Bigfoot. I didn't know what I was looking at first. I had no idea. And keep in mind, I'm a skeptic, a doubter. I don't believe they're real at the time. I totally don't. Well, anyway, I watched this thing like make its way past these houses. In those lights outside that light up your house outside, and then it would walk to the next one, and it would walk up by those poles, and that's what really amazed me. That thing I've never seen nothing so big. From a distance, I could tell it was huge. And I didn't know what I'm looking at the time. I'm just like, I could just see something moving out there in the darkness and under those lights. And it came past the ranger station. There was a gate it had to walk through, and it came right into our camp. And you could see where our HR and our first aid and our where we eat, where they feed us, and where we wash up. And there were some restrooms farther back. And anyway, this creature got by the gate. When it came through the gate, what I witnessed at that time, and keep in mind, I'm hollering at my crew to wake up, get up and look, see what I'm looking at. I'm telling them, hey guys, I don't know what this is. What is this? Well, anyway, Bigfoot came through the gate, right? He's Bigfoot at first. What I'm looking at is something standing upright and it's about 12 feet tall, and it's broad. And I mean, when I put my arms out like this, add on about that much more on each side, and he's solid muscle. And he's walking towards me. Then he gets down on the ground, and what he does with his fingers and his toes, and his head is looking up right at me. I had my headlamp like a spotlight, and I was keeping it on his eyes, and his eyes were red. And they were huge and big, farther apart than any human. And they were huge, coming at me. They were looking right at me. Keep in mind, everything I'm telling you, he's looking right at me with my spotlight on him. Okay, he's crawling. I don't know how he done it with his fingers and his toes, but he realized you could see him, and he was crawling on his toes and fingers straight at me, towards me, looking at me with his head up. And I don't know how he did it with his fingers and his toes, but he was crawling towards me, straight at me. Then he stops and pauses, and he gets up on all fours, and he does like this, a fist, sort of, but it changed into a paw of a wolf. And don't ask me how they did it. You know, like those movies, Werewolf of London, and they have sound effects? There was no sound effects. They just did it. And he changed into the biggest wolf I ever seen. He still had those red eyes, because I had my headlamp on him. He's walking towards me. I'm still hollering at my crew, "Hey guys, get up, check this out." And I didn't want to get too loud because I didn't want to scare it away. I'm trying to balance everything here and get them up and not scare the Bigfoot away. Well, anyway, I knew it wasn't a wolf because it had no tail, and it was Bigfoot at first, and I seen it change into that. Okay, and it's walking towards me. Then it stops about halfway, and it pauses again, and then it throws its fists out like from a wolf paw to just an open hand paw like that, and it, honest to God, it turned into the biggest grizzly claws I ever saw. A hump came up on its back. The ears went down and were shorter and rounder, and the snout went back, and a hump came up on its back. And it turned into the biggest grizzly bear I ever friggin' seen. And it had claws and everything. Just like a grizzly. And it's walking towards me, Josh. It's walking towards me. Next thing it did, it stood up. It pushed off its left leg and stood up right in front of me and turned back into Bigfoot. And this was in Elk Creek National Park, Idaho, out by Boise, Idaho. It's still there. And I know if we ever was to go there, that Bigfoot, that same one, would come back to me.
I got something a little bit different for you guys tonight. I'm going to be going over a couple of the encounters that I've had with Bigfoot, and probably the whole reason that this channel is in existence. I've not talked about this yet, and very few people know the first part of my story. I've talked a little bit about the one encounter I've had. I've actually mentioned it on this channel. If you go back and look at some of my first videos, I talk about it on there, but there's some of the story that I didn't mention, and I've waited a long time to get this off my chest, and so I thought, well, you guys come on here and do that, I might as well do the same thing. So let's just jump right into this story. We grew up really poor, had a great childhood. My dad provided for us the best that he could, and he always made sure that we were well taken care of and provided for, and I had a great childhood full of great memories, lots of good friends. I was very blessed, but the area we grew up in was really rural, and somehow my dad figured out how to buy some property and build a house. Still to this day, I don't know how he did what he did, but anyway, so kind of describe the property for you guys. We were pretty close to the National Forest, not real far. So you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of acres of just wilderness, really close to where we grew up. And, Arkansas is a really rural place, and it's a beautiful state. And I loved living here growing up. But anyways, so the property was about 4 acres, I want to say. And so my dad cleared out just enough for a house and a front yard. And the rest of it, he kind of took his time with and cleared it out. And the longer we were there, I think we moved there when I was about 7 years old, I want to say. And we'll fast forward to I was about 14. Dad had got the house finished, and it's set up. The property kind of sloped down, and so my dad had built it. At the back of it, it was about 6 foot off the ground, I would say, and then there was a deck and a sliding glass door. And so my parents started to leave me at home, as most parents do when you get to be about that age, and they had gone somewhere for the night, and it was in the wintertime, so it got dark pretty early. And so around 5 or 6 o'clock, I want to say somewhere around there, I just happened to be walking by the window, and I looked out the back glass door, and the wood line was probably 20 feet from the back of the deck, probably. And I just remember seeing movement, and I paused and I stopped, and the lights were on, so you could see into the house. And so I look out there, and there's this black creature that comes walking out of the woods. And this thing was massive. When I say massive, I could see from about here up over the deck, standing there, and the house is 6 foot off the ground, the back of it. So this thing had to be 10 foot tall. I don't know. It was massive and really, really broad. I couldn't really see details because it was just black. And as you can imagine, a 14-year-old kid, I was scared to death. So I froze. I stood there, and me and this thing locked eyes. And I say locked eyes, but I mean, I locked onto it, and I know it stood and looked at me because it didn't move. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it felt like an eternity sitting there looking at this thing, not knowing what it was. And so I just happened to remember that my dad had a shotgun. He loved this shotgun, still has it to this day, a 410 shotgun. And I thought, I need to get the shotgun. It's all I could think of. There was no cell phone, so I couldn't call somebody, so I couldn't call them. And so I went and grabbed the shotgun, and I came back downstairs, and the thing is still standing there. It wasn't a person. It's too big to be a person. So I take the shotgun. It was a single shot shotgun, and I put the ammunition in it, and I click the gun like that. And I'm standing there, 14-year-old kid, holding this shotgun. And this thing just stands there for a minute. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? If this thing starts approaching the house, what am I going to do? Fortunately, it turns around and it walks off into the woods the same way it came. And that really changed my life forever, because from that point on, I was really scared to go into the woods by myself. I didn't tell my parents. I still haven't told my mom the story. I told my dad that I saw something years later, but it wasn't a man. It was something that was massive. And fast forward to about a year later, somehow again, my dad, my hero, brought home a four-wheeler for me. I don't know how he did that. I still to this day don't know how he did that. But anyways, so, that was freedom for me. That meant that I could go and ride around, and my dad, I had an amazing childhood, but my dad would let me ride with my buddies, and we would all go out and ride around the same area, probably within a 10-mile radius probably. And it's pretty close to the Arkansas River. So just a lot of wilderness, a lot of trails, man. We made so many trails. And so right close to where we lived, they would dig out a shell pit looking for shell. And so we'd leave these big open pits, and sometimes it was just in the middle of nowhere. So one evening we found this pit, and it was a pretty big pit. And in the middle of this pit, there was a tire and a rope. Well, what do you do with a tire and a rope and a four-wheeler? I mean, you tie the rope to the tire and to the four-wheeler, and you do 360s with it, and we ride on the back of the tire. And so we did that for quite a while. And I don't remember how many times we went back to the place, but that was just a common thing we did. And so one night we were out riding, and there was a few of us there, and we'd been doing the donuts on this tire, and we stopped and we were talking, young kids do, and I just happened to look over to the right. Same black creature comes walking out of the woodline. Now, it was about 6 feet from where it was at to the pit where they dug out, and we were probably a good 30 yards away from this creature. We didn't waste any time that night. I didn't stand and look at it. We started our four-wheelers and we left. Still to this day, we've never talked about it. It's never been brought up. We didn't say a word that night. We just left. And so, as a young man, that really impacted me, because I knew early on that there was more to this world out there than what most people will talk about. And so the last and final encounter that I had was when I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, same area. And this happened probably 5 minutes from where I grew up, the house. So main highway. We were coming down we had on a date with my wife on date night. It had been raining. And so this main road, it's the main road that goes through, where I lived at in real rural, like I said, close to the National Forest. And I was coming straight up, and you just a long straight stretch, and you go straight up this hill, really steep. And I look over to the right, and there's in my peripheral vision, I see this white thing, and it jumps. I catch it about right here in my peripheral vision, and it jumps over the hood of my car, takes one step, and is gone into the woods. Now I was going about 50, 55, probably somewhere in there. And so my uncle owned all that property right there. And there was a church that he built right where this thing jumped. And there was a dirt road that you could go and go down to the church. And so, looking back, I really regret taking my wife with me. That was really stupid, because if something would have went south, and I didn't have a gun on me at the time, which was uncommon because I spent, the majority of my life as a police officer. I always carried. So I go off down in there looking for this thing. No tracks, didn't see anything. But all I can tell you, it was large. It was massive. White, like dirty white, shaggy type hair. And you just, it was the craziest thing. Like, it happened so fast. I don't know of any other animal that could have cleared a car like that and just been gone. And so that kind of started me down this journey of knowing, like, hey, I've seen this creature 3 times. And I kind of have this, I don't know, theory, I guess, because a lot of people that I've talked to, if they see the creature, they're going to see it again some point in time in their life. Some of my guests have seen Bigfoot, a cryptid, 3-4 times, So I don't know if there's something tied to that. I don't know why that is, but that's a common denominator in this world. And, the more I talk to people that come on this show and guests like you and people that are listening to this podcast, the more I realize, man, there's a lot of different things that just, weird me out about Bigfoot. And, people, I'm always asking my guests, what do I think Bigfoot is? And, I personally think it's Nephilim, a fallen angel. Something with that. I'm a Christian, and so I look at everything through that lens, and that's what makes sense to me. But nobody really knows. Nobody's an expert. But I just thought I would share that experience with you guys. And, that's the whole reason I started this podcast, is to give people a safe place to share their stories. And, I hadn't done that yet. I hadn't shared my full experience. So there it is. I hope you enjoy it. One more thing, and I want you guys to go watch this video after you watch this, because it ties into this area. When I was about 5 years old, my dad had an encounter with a UFO not far from where I had my experience with Bigfoot. So it's kind of weird in this world. UFOs, orbs, and Bigfoot kind of all line up. Why that is, I have no idea. I'm just a guy who loves talking about this stuff and loves to talk to people and give them a safe place to share their stories. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Thanks for letting me share my encounter. As always, I appreciate you guys. Without you, it would not be possible. If you've got a mystery you would like to send me, you can send it to me by email at video@jazzcreativear.com. And like I always say, stay prayed up, guys. We'll talk soon.
I am my own worst critic. How many times have you heard people say that? But did you know the Bible says that whatever a man thinketh, that's what he is. It also says that the power of life and death lay in the tongue. The words you say over you matter. The words you say over your family, your children, your coworkers, those things matter, and words have life. And it's really important what you believe about yourself. So if you knew who you were, you would never say those things. In the Bible, it says that we were made in God's image. You were made in the very image of God. And God does not make mistakes. You are his child. And you have authority over the family that God has given you. So if you're a husband, if you're a leader, and you're saying things about your family that you shouldn't, be careful with those words, because it can affect them and you. God loves you today. He set you up in that place for a purpose. So lead with integrity, be careful and kind with your words, and know who you are in Christ.